Okay, I've published that page. If you're just watching on YouTube, probably not watching on YouTube, but if you are, just starting up, sorry about the coughing, and this will be trimmed off the eventual broadcast, but as usual, I have to do a little setup first. And especially as far as the video is concerned, because again, I never know what it's going to be on YouTube before it actually runs. There's got to be a way around that. You've heard me talk about this enough, but oh well. I'm just doing that. And it's almost time. So let's publish this page. Publish. And then we'll go over to the Activity Center. So, Activity Center. Oh, looks like we're good. Okay. Would like to see critical thinking skills. Yes. Yes. Why won't my Zoom meeting come up? There we go. Got it. All right. So it should be any time now. And I'll let Lexi out of the room while we're waiting. Good, Lexi. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Can't live with them. Can't live with them. Okay. 12:01. It's possible nobody will join because it's weird in the US at the moment. But that's not a problem. I've got tons of slides ready if nobody joins. Let's just start up the video. So this is me. And this is my still messy office. I'm working on it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. That's interesting. If I shake the table, watch this. I'll shake the table. You see how it moves parts of the image. Look at the plant. See, it moves. It's like the video captures an area, right, and then treats that as an image, as a single whole image that it moves up and down, but it doesn't do it in sync with the other stuff. So I don't know if this translates out to YouTube, but I can really see it on my screen when I shake this. I get part of the plant. It's almost like it tries to put dimensions on it, or like to see the 3D. So it focuses on near objects and just leaves the back static. And so it achieves, compression by, we'll just treat the whole back as a photograph, and we'll just leave it until something changes. And we'll just focus on what's in front and move only that. Right. So if we look at my hand moving, right, what's actually happening in Zoom is the only thing that's being updated is my hand. It's presenting it in layers. At least that's my theory. And my theory is supported by this, right? Where when I move my plant, or I'm shaking the camera, right? Which makes it appear. So the plant is moving up and down. And only the front of the plant moves, but the back of the plant stays static. So that's pretty cool. Okay, 1203. And I didn't do very many videos this week. And that's another factor, I think. So there's a concern, I guess, well, probably true, but there isn't really a whole lot to talk about. Although I did send out a bunch of links in the course. But I did a lot of work. You just can't see it. So but yeah, I'll tell you, I'm just gonna launch into doing a presentation if nobody shows up in like another minute. And that, by the way, is perfectly fine with me. Nobody has an obligation to show up. It's nice if they do, but if they don't, well, such is life. We move on with the world. And I do have, like I said, I have tons of stuff ready to go. So I'm not going to worry about that at all. Wonder if anyone is indeed watching on YouTube. Can't really tell when I do a live broadcast from Zoom to YouTube because I don't have the nice studio and OBS and all of that doing the work and doing the display for me. So, all right. So still no thing. One watching now. Let's try reloading the page. One watching now. That could be me watching. Play for me. So I'm just looking at the YouTube page now. All right. All right. Then okay. Good enough. I will spend this time on the first of my presentations. Like I say, I've got a number of them lined up. And, well, I have one lined up, but it's going to have several parts, okay? And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do the first part, and then I'll do the others in the more traditional form. Oh, there's Mark. Oh. So I won't be doing a presentation right at this moment. But I will berate him for being late. No, I won't.
It's all Bill Gates' fault.
It's all Bill Gates' fault, yeah. I wondered what especially your status would be, but just in general with Sharita as well, with the madness of Black Friday upon us. But now, of course, we don't have the US Thanksgiving holiday, but that doesn't stop people from taking a break, going shopping, or etc. And also, there hasn't been much in the way of video content this week to respond to. So that's a factor as well. But I've been doing tons of stuff. I mean, I've got uh, almost 70 slides in the hopper ready for video presentation, but I'm being super careful and going over multiple sources and reviewing things to make sure I get it right. Because all of this stuff, the whole ethics of care did not exist when I was in university. And didn't really begin to exist until the time I had started working in the field of online learning. So it's not like I grew up with it the way I grew up with all the rest of it. So I'm just trying to be a bit more careful about it. And so I'll have to preface my video presentation with caveats. And the other side of it too is a lot of this stuff comes from what is depicted now as feminist ethics or a feminist perspective, and I aren't one. And so I need to be a bit sensitive about that, and I'll have to say something along the lines of, look, don't take my word for this. This is my interpretation, the best I can do, given my background and given who I am. But this is my reading of the best interpretation I have of this subject.
Yeah, and yet men can be feminists.
Yeah.
But yeah, we live in fraught times.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see my email this week?
I don't think so. Remind me, what was it?
Yeah, you usually respond. The main thing was that you're labeling this module 7, and that doesn't align with the original course schedule. And so I just, was that a typo, a mistake, or intentional? I didn't know. So that I did that after I saw Monday's conversation labeled as module 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I did see that email, and I made some corrections, and I haven't 100% corrected everything. But again, this is a result of the fact that not everything is as automated as I would like, especially with respect to the events. But just in general, changing the schedule like that messed things up a bit.
Yeah, we're in week 7, but I believe we're in module 6. But unless you change something, but anyway, yeah. So that was, and I forget, there was a couple little things, but that was the main thing.
And we're in the odd situation of wrapping up module 6 before most of the content that I have for module 6 has been posted. Although I've posted a bunch of articles this week, which I think helped. Although some of them were book length, which probably didn't help.
Yeah, I haven't gotten through all of it, that's for sure.
No, and no one would expect you to. Yeah, I've been doing, a lot of background reading for this, which is fine. I mean, the whole point of a MOOC is that I grow with the material as well as the participants in the MOOC. So, I mean, this is what I've always hoped for in MOOCs. And, back in the day when I had lots of people in MOOCs, it really only ever happened when I had George Siemens with me, because he's popular.
He's in educational institutions. You're off in a research center, so you don't have the same.
Exactly. I don't have the same visibility. When you have students, you automatically have a bunch of people who can spread, if not your work, at least your name. And I've seen that. If I had a cadre of 50 to 80 students every year after year after year,
multiplying,
which is typically how it's done, right? And always has been done. So yeah, of course I'm doing that differently too.
And that actually is my question today about duty of care and education. So, in the context of institutions,
Yeah.
I've never, and it's just, I really have doubts this week after all the news and everything that's going on. Is it me that, just does not fit into institutions? Or, as it appears to me, institutions are kind of uncaring things by their nature, self-preserving, willing to eject any oppositional or even perceived oppositional entities inside. And so that's, so I read some of the duty of care, and like I said, I did focus on that last summer, I think it was, or late spring, with Mahabali and Mia Zamora. And I just got the same feeling. And I can go on and on and on about my interactions with institutions. I can go on and on just with higher educational institutions, much less all the other American institutions that I have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I just don't see it. Even though, in particular, higher education, at least in California, from my point of view, is now run by women. I mean, that's just, it's overwhelmingly run by women, except for like the top 10 spots. There's still that last floor to crack into. But other than that, it's just overwhelmingly dominated by women at all levels of administration, including my college presidents. Nearly all of them were women, in my recent college experience. And I'm just not seeing that care is even being recognized. Yeah. So,
I mean, to say the obvious, first of all, it's not bad that they're all run by women. I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with that.
No.
And in many ways, that's a good thing. So I'm just getting that on the record.
But if it's just maintenance of the same old hierarchy, it doesn't make any difference.
And you're picking at a tension there that I've also seen in a slightly different way in the work that I've been doing. And it won't really come out in the videos much. But we're talking after the fact, like this video comes after those videos in the overall scheme of things. So we're talking about videos that we haven't even seen yet, much less haven't even been produced yet, but that's okay. I can handle that. I'm a philosopher who says time has to be linear anyways.
Exactly.
But and that's one of the things I notice about a lot of the key figures writing in the field. Carol Gilligan, for example, is they're at these institutions and they hold positions in these institutions. I don't have a list right in front of me of who is working where or who studied where, but it's the usual nexus of universities like Harvard and such. Now I feel like, for the integrity of the video, that I should look it up. So let me just take a quick look. Okay, so Carol Gilligan is, she studied at Radcliffe, PhD at Harvard, right? So, okay. Began at University of Chicago. I think now she's at NYU. So that's her. Who else have we got? Right, Nell Noddings. Just looking her up again. Who actually, I think, started working on all of this stuff well before Carol Gilligan, but
it goes back to the 80s, which is another interesting thing that she's been promoting this now for 40 years,
Yeah.
and it's just become invisible.
Master's from Rutgers, PhD in education from Stanford. And I'm not sure, well, I guess, yeah, well, she's not working now, I don't think, but where
Did I
did
see
she?
she's 92 years old or something?
Yeah, so probably not doing so many lectures at the moment. Doesn't really tell me here where she did her work. I'm looking at Wikipedia, and another thing to note as well. The Wikipedia coverage of these writers as compared to some of the ones that we've looked at previously is mostly awful.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them are just stubs. Okay, Joan Toronto. Okay, let's check it out. Okay. Okay, is currently professor of political science at University of Minnesota, previously at City University, New York, PhD at Princeton. So we've got Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. Now, bell hooks might be the exception here, but I'm not sure. Just two O's and hooks. Bell Hooks, by the way, is a literary name. Her given name when she was born was Gloria Jean Watkins, which is worth noting. And of course, she does not capitalize her writing name. The name is borrowed from her maternal great-grandmother, fully capitalized, Belle Blair Hooks. So that's where that comes from. Okay, she was educated at Stanford, and then got her PhD at University of California. And I'm not sure where she's working now. There is, like, she did move, she was teaching and moved from a nice upper class area to a less nice, not so upper class area. So taught at a bunch of universities, including City College of New York. And I'm not sure where she's right now. It doesn't say where she is right now.
She's also elderly, correct?
Yeah.
Born in the late 30s.
Well, she's not that elder. She's 69, born in 1952. So she could easily be not teaching anywhere in particular at the moment, which is certainly how I would want to be when I'm at the age of 69.
So she made a big splash when she was quite young. I didn't realize how young she must have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the age of 30, she had made her mark.
Yeah. So, you know, but here we go. Stanford, Harvard, Princeton. You know, I'm sure all of these institutions, and I've never studied at any of them, of course, I'm sure all of these institutions are very caring for their own students. But, you know, I honestly don't see a whole lot of evidence of caring from them for people outside their institution. I'm sure they do lots of foundation and charity work, but my observation is it's as much a fundraising activity as it is a charitable activity. Now, that could be sour grapes, and I'll admit that, but still, you know, I've spoken in the past in reference to many other subjects about what I call the nexus, which is, you know, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton. In Britain, you have Cambridge and Oxford, you know, the elite universities. And what I've observed and others have observed is a lot of the time the ideas existed on the ground long before they came out and were popularized by writers from these institutions. And the writers at these institutions have multi-million-dollar publicity arms behind them. And so, the people who work there are promoted as the people who defined the discipline. And I think we'll find that, maybe a historian of the philosophy of care ethics will find that this is the case. Certainly the idea of care predates them. Certainly the idea of feminism predates them. And a lot of these ideas, when we go through the slides and the talk that I'll do, which we're now talking about in the past tense, we can see how many of these ideas have been picked up from outside feminism and outside the philosophy of care. That's not to say that these aren't important ideas, and it's also not to say that these aren't significant figures. Both of those are true. They're important, and we need to talk about them, if only because of the influence that they've had. But I think that gives us some insight into the contradiction that you pointed out between the institutions and the philosophy, right? Where else but these kind of institutions, which are, to be honest, a little bit Machiavellian, but where else would you have, in our society at least, the mechanism and the money to popularize these ideas? If there were people who had them before, they almost certainly would not have had the money and the means to promote them. That's my view, anyways.
Well, I agree. And I have the opinion that most good ideas come from the bottom and percolate up. Social ideas in particular. In fact, one of my little projects is looking at the origins of this whole identity politics conundrum. I was going for a stronger word, but I'll go with conundrum. How that originated on the ground, mostly in California. It turns out the first women's studies program, Black studies, Asian studies, Latin studies, the free speech movement that preceded them. All of this percolated, and then of course Black Power. All came out of California in the 60s. And the conservative, again, socially not, well, and politically, but socially conservative backlash has tried to erase that origin, and now puts it all on the elites. Now it's a problem with the elites. But it didn't start there. It started with people demanding access to these institutions. And then there's this problem of tokenism is not the right word, but it's almost theatrical the way positions are filled now, at least in California, higher education.
And we would have to be in a better position, even. I don't think either of us is in a position, because we haven't done the requisite 10, 20 years of research into this history to know the full story. And so we need to be a bit careful here, which is, and I know you appreciate that. But it would be, I'm not even sure that a lot of the documentation even exists, but we know that there was a history of things like teach-ins. We know about, as you say, the Black Power movements and all of that. A lot of the stuff in Noddings looks back at the history of some of that, or not Noddings, Bell Hooks looks back at the history of some of that, and especially the racial politics, which is definitely interesting to read.
There is a lot of
But
that source material online, shockingly. I've been able to
yeah,
find, flyers,
yeah,
student petitions, all original copies that have been digitized. Just
yeah,
because a lot of it took place in California, and so has a lot of the digital
yeah.
technology, so that it's just a coincidence, but a lot of that is available. I was surprised.
And also, too, and this has nothing to do with the current generation of thinkers that we're talking about here, but there's also a secondary industry that's following from them, um, which doesn't address itself so much to care, but is certainly based on critical pedagogy and critical theory. And again, there's a lot of serious, proper work being done in that, and there are some valuable ideas. And then there are some people co-opting it and trying to make a living out of it. It's really hard to pick apart.
Yeah.
And it's this perennial division, and I've sensed it my whole life because in many ways I've lived through a lot of this. But it's this perennial division of the people who genuinely inhabit this space and are motivated and want to do work in it because they feel it's important, and the people who think it would be a good career move and want to do it because they think it will create, well, these days, followers
And resources in institutions.
and resources. Yeah. And I'm not going to say who's who, right? Because I have no idea. And I would say that in all likelihood, the people that we're studying are the people who are serious about this. But if we go out into the wider community where there is a lot of this kind of discussion, sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're actually trying to create positive conditions for people who are disadvantaged. Sometimes they want to use it as a weapon is too strong, but a weapon in debate.
Tool. Yeah.
A tool, debating tool, a way to get their way. None of that, I mean, all of that is just, we're just talking about the sociology around the ideas and not the ideas themselves. The ideas themselves, to a large degree, and actually to an astonishing degree, given where I come from, I'm largely in support of. And I suspect, you talked about working class culture and working class background. I'll bet you that you're largely in support of them too. I think. I mean, you can.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm from California. I supported all these my entire life.
Yeah.
But now I see how some of them can be used for purposes that they were not intended for.
Yeah.
But that's that's just human nature.
Yeah.
So in your research, if I can get a little preview here, did you find applications of this duty of care being institutionalized or being applied in a structure?
The short answer is yes.
Good.
That's
good. That's what I'm hoping to find.
And that's actually where the videos that I have done actually lead to a discussion of pedagogy of care and some of the applications of that. There's like one example and some of these are from Canada, you'll have to forgive me, but a lot of the, like, there's a discussion, for example, of equity and inclusion, and I drew from some of the programs and activities that are being done in Ontario. I'm just looking for the image in the slides, and I'm not finding it because it's hard. Is that it? No, that's not it.
While you're searching, when we were talking about Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, we forgot Yale.
Yeah.
Is there that same nexus in Canada? Are there 2 or 3 institutions that produce most of the upper levels of government?
Oh, of government, yeah. St. Francis Xavier, which is a private university in Atlantic Canada, has an undue influence, but it's not the same. We don't have Harvard's, MIT's, and Stanford's. Our top educational institution in the country is a public institution. It's University of Toronto, not surprisingly. There it is. And
but there's not that stranglehold like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would expect, and you look at even the writers, they've come from everywhere. Our intellectual activity is much more equitably distributed. We will have centers of excellence in different areas, like Waterloo University is very well known for computer science. Quebec, artificial intelligence, especially University de Montreal. Toronto is education, Ontario Institute for the Studies in Education, or OISE. Also, political science is strong there. We have Osgoode Hall, which is a law school, which is very influential. But again, there's the majority. No, you wouldn't have. But it's the top law school in the country. Very prestigious, you don't go to Osgoode Hall.
But that's where your judges come from.
Many of them will, yeah.
Many of them, the Department of Justice, whatever that's called. Yeah.
But again, not even the majority, and certainly not the overwhelming presence the way you see it in the US and elsewhere from those nexus institutions.
Yeah, Harvard Law School. I mean, so it occurs to me that you have the same, I guess it's the timeline of the development of the country, that it's the Atlantic half of the country that dominates the federal institutions. It's one of my pet peeves. It's like, we have Stanford, we have Cal, University of Washington's a perfectly good R1 institution, and yet, with except for the current vice president, it's been very difficult for people to break into those higher echelons from west of the Mississippi.
Well, Canada again is
University of Chicago, not so much.
Like we have very good institutions in the West, and I haven't mentioned them, but University of Alberta is very good, one of the top ranked in the world. Top 100 in the world, not top 10. I don't think any of our institutions are top 10. University of British Columbia, similarly. I came from the University of Calgary, which is, well, it's not a top institution, but I considered my education to be first class, honestly, and just as good as anything anyone in Harvard would get. What I didn't get is the marketing machine, because Calgary didn't have that, and the social contacts. Yeah,
it seems to be an important thing.
Yeah. Although, I see University of Calgary people like scattered throughout politics and media, etc. People I worked with at the student newspaper there, I see them showing up in government and in media. So, But yeah, not the same. I mean, it would be the comparison would be if in the US you had not 5 or 6 top institutions, but 50 or 60 top institutions. And all your influential people came from those. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Now,
So
I
very
didn't
good.
mean to derail you, though. You were looking for something when I dropped that in.
Yeah, which I did find because I can multitask. So yeah, Ontario's Statement of Inclusion Principles, for example, which is it's let me just pop it open here. Sure. Okay, I'm sharing. I'm not sure what I'm sharing, but am I sharing? Yeah, I'm just sharing PowerPoint. Okay, good enough.
Yeah, I'm seeing an inclusion slide.
Yeah, so I just want to pull that up a bit bigger. Set up slideshow. I always have to reset that. It's so annoying. Current slide. There we go. I'll click on that. And oh, you're probably not seeing this then. But basically, it's donation to IAI. This isn't Ontario government. I thought it was Integration Action for Inclusion, whatever that is. Who we are.
Well, I'm seeing the inclusion slide, which is inclusionontario.ca.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I thought it was Government of Ontario, but it isn't actually. But basically, it's people who are, working to quote break down systemic barriers that prevent students with disabilities from fully experiencing educational opportunities free from discrimination. And we do have quite a bit of work in that area. Someone I work with from time to time is Yuta Trevoranis, who's based at Ontario College of Art and Design University. And I know there's a contradiction in the name, but they started out as a college, they became a university, but they didn't want to give up the name. So there you have it. But she does a lot of really practical, concrete work in accessibility, applications that make stuff accessible, inclusive design, policy work, and it's based on a lot of these ideas. I mean, it's a practical implementation of a lot of these ideas. So it's the same sort of group. This group does the same sort of thing. Let me see what else I can find. So, because I mean, I'm just okay. La-di-da-di-da. I know I'm just jumping through slides, but
it's a little preview is the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's a little preview, but yeah, this isn't it, but I'm seeing like there's a paper that I reference in here somewhere about MOOC development for teacher professional development during the pandemic. And as they're doing this, they're taking particular account of the ethics of care in designing these courses so that they're not just information dumps, but actually working on and building the community of teachers online so that they're able to be self-supportive and continue learning even after the course is over. It's very similar to the MOOCs that George Siemens and I designed in 2008, and there's a lot of overlap of the same ideas. But again, this is a practical implementation of some of these things that we're talking about here. Um, I'm not sure exactly where that is in the slides. uh, I almost think, and this thought just occurred to me, but if I had to say so, if I was searching for practical implementations of this, I think an argument could be made that Sesame Street is one such practical implementation, which might sound odd, but all the principles that Sesame Street puts forward and implements, I know it's a TV show and it's not an interactive online community, but I mean, you do what you can with the technology, right? But, the ideas of community, the ideas of diversity and inclusiveness, even the participation, they get the kids to sing along with the songs and all of that. And they do some, what I consider to be fairly advanced work in developing skills like pattern recognition. That seems to me to be a pretty practical implementation. And I wonder, I hadn't thought of this before, I wonder if you can track divisions in American society to divisions between who watched and who didn't watch Sesame Street.
Now there's a good research project.
There is a good research project. I agree.
I know a lot of people who would sort of divide it between Star Trek fans and non-Star Trek fans on the diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. Similarly, I wonder if we could say, people who like Star Wars are more likely to be authoritarian. Or at least centralized thought. I don't know. So, I'm just looking and then giving you a bit of a better view rather than just a lot of the work in, there's a whole domain of thought around, it began as an approach called knowledge translation. And the idea was to practically apply research done at research institutions and universities, apply that to real world situations like hospitals and schools, etc. And so the idea originally was if somebody would come along, look at this research, and then quote unquote translate it into the language that people can actually use. And that was a thing for a while, but what happened was, consistent with pretty much everything that is said in the ethics of care philosophy, you can't approach it that way. You can't just come up with generalizations and apply them to particular situations. There has to be a dialogue, and the knowledge has to come from both sides. And so the philosophy has morphed into something called knowledge mobilization. And you can sort of see the activist phrasing there. But with knowledge mobilization, now what you have is the idea where the recipients and the researchers are both co-inquirers, and they're both involved in the process of understanding and implementing the research, but with the perspective that the implementation is always going to be particular in particular circumstances, because each circumstance, each individual case, in fact, is going to be different. There's just too many individual circumstances, or too many variables, too many factors to try to apply a generalization to it. And that's a thing. I think that's an outcome of this approach to thinking, especially about care, where you saw this knowledge mobilization a lot in the first instance was in the healthcare community, at least in Canada. I can't speak to what the healthcare community in the United States does because it's just so exceptional. It's so unusual.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to remember Alex Usher, who's a commentator here, took those concepts. Well, he didn't do this. He's reporting on this, but what's the phrase he used? It came up just recently. But again, the idea is to look at and try to understand the practical applications of research and development in the community. Now, he approached this, as does the business community generally, from the perspective of what they call a benefits analysis. Now, this is very much not based in ethics of care philosophy, although there's certainly some overlap to it in that benefits are measured in particular circumstances, found in particular circumstances, and it takes work. Typically, it takes a model of some sort to track from the abstraction to the individual benefit. The model is usually called a logic model, but it's an attempt to map how the generalization produced the specific result. Now, I have my doubts about that particular approach, but it's fairly common. I'm just trying to remember what phrasing Usher used. Let me just see if I can't find it, because I'd like to get this right.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking, so one of my interests in particular is e-portfolios and assessment, prior learning assessment. And a lot of the good work is being done by nurses in the nursing community.
Yeah.
Because they are between, the education system, the application model and the doctors. And so they're in that swirl of practices, and they are co-creating, they are hands-on, and they are documenting their learning, and they use portfolios quite a bit, both in nurse training and then also in professional development.
So what I found from Usher here is impact was the word he used. It's from a November 23 column titled The Impact of Impact. Now, I criticized this in my own newsletter because for all his talk about evaluating impact, his entire column has utterly no statistics or actual cases to back it up. So, but nonetheless, we do hear this word impact quite a bit. But again, it's part of this backsliding, right? You get knowledge translation, you get mobilization, now you get impact, where we're trying to back away from, okay, well, what was the particular implementation, and let's count some beans instead. And it seems to be the thing.
I don't know if he's the originator, but the AAC&U, which is the American, I think, Association of Colleges and Universities, one of their major initiatives is high impact practices.
Yeah, exactly. Same sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they had a list of 10, and then they added e-portfolios as the 11th one.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of research around high impact practices. I had not run across Usher's name, so now I have to look back and see if he was involved in generating that model of high impact practices.
In the same vein, there's is it Richard Hattie? No, I think I'm thinking of a former New Brunswick premier, but his name is Hattie, Hattie. And anyhow, what he does is, it's John Hattie. He's from New Zealand. And he has a whole thing on what he calls effect sizes. So what he's done is he's categorized various educational interventions. I'll call it that. I don't like the concept myself, but it fits right in with this whole medical talk. But different different educational interventions like homework or personal training or learning styles, whatever, right? There's a list of 250 or some odd number like that. And what he's done is he's mapped them to educational outcomes, bracket test scores, right? And then described for each of these the effect size. In other words, how much of an impact this intervention has with respect to that outcome. Now, again, that's more in the knowledge translation kind of thing than the knowledge mobilization kind of thing, because you don't really get any discussion about what counts as an outcome. And that's a really big thing that comes up in this whole ethics of care discussion that I think is pretty important. And that is that you don't get to tell people what counts as success. They do.
What, you mean using all your budget for the year doesn't guarantee success?
No. But I mean, and this is, this goes back, again, in my work, it goes back to the early days of the MOOC and even before that, right? And I always think of Dave Cormier talking about this, where one of the things that you need to do before you take a MOOC is think about what would count as success in taking that MOOC. Because, well, first of all, if you don't, someone else will define that for you. But secondly, especially in one of our MOOCs where you need to decide what to do and how to participate and all of that, you kind of need to know what it is you're working toward. Makes sense, right? And certainly in my experience, not just in MOOCs, but in traditional classes as well, is pretty much everybody's in that class for a different reason. I especially saw that working in Northern Alberta, where some people were in the class just to get out of the house because the home situation wasn't so great. Other people were trying to get out of the life. Other people were genuinely interested in the subject. Other people, a certain number of people were looking for the degree or the diploma.
Promotion.
Or promotion, or there's a whole range, right? And that range becomes wider still when we talk about a MOOC that isn't tied to a specific professional or academic degree or credential. So you have to have this thing at the start where you decide, well, what would I count as success? And that's core in the ethics of care and therefore the pedagogy of care, where the person providing the service is responding not to what they perceive to be the need, but to what is actually expressed as the need. Now, there's always going to be some interpretation because people are crappy at expressing what they need. Sometimes people don't know what they need. Sometimes they're not in a position to express their need. And very often there'll be a back and forth. But it's interesting because it goes all the way back, at least in my experience, to the early days of using discussion forums to support learning. People did that back then when there were discussion forums. And I've quoted this a number of times from someone called Erin Brewer. She's since changed her name, but talking about the beekeeping discussion list. And one person would ask a question on the list. And the response wouldn't be just to provide an answer. The response would be to ask, well, why do you need to know this? Right? What are you trying to do? And that creates a back and forth discussion where, you don't just simply get an answer to the question. You get, support with respect to your expressed need.
And the dialogue.
And the dialogue, right? But the dialogue is, it's not an end in itself. It's to support the need, the agency, the autonomy, etc., of the person in question who's asking the question. So it's not a case of, I will tell you what you need to know if you want to raise bees. It's like, well, you're raising bees. You don't really know why. Don't really know what you hope to achieve. But if you tell me, maybe I can be helpful here. Yeah. The total difference in the relationship.
Yeah, Reddit is still quite a useful place.
Yeah, exactly.
To see these dialogues and how they develop.
Yeah, indeed. Reddit is one. Stack Overflow is another one for computer programmers, where you see a lot of the same sort of thing. GitHub, a bit less so because there's less of a discussion aspect.
Right.
You'll often find a Stack Overflow discussion end up with stuff being put in GitHub or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other forums like that, but those are the most popular. And it makes sense, because, on the internet where you have 1 billion people and you don't know who you're talking to, you can't really assume you know what the other person wants. But there's commentary throughout, in all of the discussion that I've read about, the way we just simply presumed we understood. I'm using we very loosely. Simply presumed we knew or we understood what people need, and then delivered that, just like knowledge translation, or just like the presumption behind measuring impact. But
I like this idea of defining personal outcomes.
Yeah.
And then always, to me, the most difficult thing is tracking the emergent part.
Yeah.
Documenting, just being aware of, looking for, and then hopefully documenting and potentially building upon the emergent aspects. But I think both, right? You need this assessment at the beginning or pre-assessment of outcomes, desired outcomes, and then also the ability to track emergent themes. And that's what I'm interested in, and institutions are not. They have their preset outcomes, and there's really no way to add or insert emergent themes.
And I don't
pop
think
up in discussions, but they're left behind.
I don't think they can change that either, because their whole business proposition, their whole business model is based on, we set these credentials. We are the arbiters who know whether someone is qualified or not to do whatever. We set the standards, and people just have to meet them. That's the business proposition. That's where, why people want those degrees and diplomas, because of what they signify. But it comes back to what you said at the start. It seems really hard to imagine the institutions then actually engaging in this process of dialogue and discussion about what people actually need. And just to wrap it up, because we're just about at time, you sort of see flavors of that in ethics of care philosophy itself, where instead of this discussion happening, it's a more like No, you need to do a MOOC like this. You need to engage in critical pedagogy. This is what you have to do in order to address oppression or discrimination, etc. And so we have this sense again in which the experts in critical pedagogy will tell the rest of us how to do this. And that's kind of where I would push back a bit, because, I do critical pedagogy, certainly. Anyone who's read me knows that, I've been known to indulge, but obviously I'm coming from a very different perspective, and the sorts of things that I'm responding to and pushing back against aren't going to be the same as those that have dominated the discussion thus far. Not to say that those things aren't important, but from my perspective, they're not the only things that are important.
It seems to me that you've put your finger on what might be necessary for the duty of care is to, and this is what's so difficult for institutions, is to assess each learner and set some outcomes based on the learner's needs. And that seems to be the conflict, or the whatever you want to call it. For institutions trying to support learning and yet caring at the same time. Yeah.
It's a dilemma. And
that's the word.
It's a dilemma that's doubled when you try to automate it. Because how do you automate it? All right. Because we're talking about analytics and AI. That's what the course is, right? How do you automate it? Does it even make sense to automate it? Is it conceivable that you could automate it? Or is there just something inherently difficult about individual humans in individual contexts? It's virtually impossible for an institution to deal with it, which is operating at a certain level of abstraction. Automation seems almost impossible. I don't think it is.
Yet what's being sold to us is personalized learning.
It's
very different than what we've just been talking about.
It's very different. And in almost all cases, it's, these abstract principles being translated and applied to individual circumstances, whether or not that actually meets the expressed need of the individual in question. And that's a big, flashpoint for the ethics of AI and analytics. And to me, it's the flashpoint. Forget about surveillance, forget about cryptography, and all of the rest of that. Forget about privacy, forget about biased data and all of that. All of those are discussions about how can we get it right for when we impose it on someone, right? But the flashpoint is us thinking we have a mechanism for telling you what you need versus you saying what you need. I think that's a really good spot to stop on.
I think we did some good work here today.
I think we did. So I got videos coming. Some probably later today, some probably tomorrow. Like you saw there, I've got almost 70 slides. I'll have more than 70 when I'm done. I'm not sweating it. I mean, this is just doing the work that needs to be done. And just as I was persnickety when it came to categorizing all the different uses of analytics and AI and learning and categorizing all the issues that come up, I'm being persnickety and being as comprehensive and deep as I can with this work. And if it takes an extra day, it takes an extra day. Because for me, success in this course, and that matters to me too, means getting it right, or at least getting it
because that will persist. This course will persist.
This course will somehow, So those are coming next week, which is module 7. The topic is, I call it the decisions we make, but the object of study is to look at the actual workflow of artificial intelligence and analytics from beginning to end, to look at what things people do when they're doing this work, and then asking how everything we have talked about so far applies to that. And again, the objective here is to, in some important ways, reframe the questions on analytics and AI, so that we're not just talking about these, debatable issues on certain points, but we're actually getting to the heart of the matter, which I don't think, honestly, any of the discussions of the ethics of analytics and AI have done so far. I think we've shown that today. I think. Yeah.
I do have one ask.
Yep.
If you can break your presentation up, it's helpful.
Oh yeah, that's the plan. Absolutely.
As
I'm not going to do a single 4-hour presentation. I'm going to break it up into chunks. Don't know how many yet, because I don't know how long I'm going to babble on about any of these topics. But yeah.
No, and I understand the value of the talking through it. That's definitely there. But when you get to 90 minutes, there, it's those are hard to commit to.
Even 90 minutes is too long. I'd rather do it like half hour at the most, but then I get going. So
see, that's I understand. That the hour, 70 minutes, 80 minutes, even 90. That's like a good quick film, right? That's about the limit of our attention span. So
I haven't gone beyond 90, I don't think so. But yeah, no 4-hour presentations, trust me.
Good. Appreciate that.
All right then. Until next time, have a good one. And Sharita, we know you're out there. Hope you're doing well.
We'll see you next time, Sharita. And sorry about your football team. That's tough.
All right.
That's a rough season.